1. We're checking out this really interesting 1982 Chevy 2500 I found on Craigslist, and I've got to tell you, this one's pretty special. We're looking at a custom-ordered trailering special with the Big Block V8, which was basically Chevy's way of saying, this truck means business. At $8,900, we're seeing a piece of American truck history with remarkably low miles. Just 63,128 on the clock. The current owner seems to have taken good care of this blue beauty, and I can totally understand their hesitation about selling it. It's got a clean title, automatic transmission, and being a rear-wheel drive with the 8-cylinder engine, it's got that classic heavy-duty truck setup that these C20s were famous for. What really catches my attention is that it's a custom-ordered trailering special. That's not something you see every day. For a 43-year-old truck, the owner says it runs and drives amazingly well, which isn't hard to believe given the mileage. While it might not have all the modern amenities of newer trucks, at this price point, you're getting a solid piece of American engineering that's becoming increasingly rare to find in this condition. Just remember, folks, this is still a 40-plus-year-old truck, so while it's in good condition, expect some age-related quirks that come with any classic vehicle. 2. We're looking at a 1978 Chevy K5 Blazer that's caught my attention, and I've got to be straight with you about this one. At $12,000, we're looking at a modified classic that's got some clear pros and cons. Let's break it down honestly. This K5 is running a 350 V8 with a fresh Holley 4-barrel carb, which is definitely a plus for performance enthusiasts. The 4-inch lift and 33-inch tires give it that awesome classic off-road stance that these Blazers are famous for. Now, I've got to keep it real. This isn't a pristine example. The seller's upfront about some rust spots, and the interior needs work. The dash has been painted gray, not original, and it's kind of a mixed bag inside with brown everything else except the seats. At least it's got new carpet. The odometer shows 100,000 miles, but it's rolled over, so we're looking at more miles than that. For $12,000, you're getting a classic 4x4 with some decent upgrades, but you'll need to be okay with a project. The clean title is good news, and that 354-barrel combo is solid, but don't expect a show-ready vehicle. This is more of a fun weekend warrior that needs some TLC, especially in the rust and interior departments. If you're looking for a K5 Blazer project with good bones, and don't mind putting in some work, this could be worth checking out. Just go in with your eyes open about the needed improvements. 3. We're checking out something really special, a 1964 Chevy C10 that's had a serious frame-off restoration. And let me tell you, this one's a stunner. At $17,500, we're looking at what appears to be an incredibly well-done build. This isn't your average 64 C10. This is a short wheelbase, big window model that's been thoroughly modernized. Let's talk about what makes this truck special. Under the hood, there's a 355 small block with modern Holley Sniper fuel injection. That's a perfect blend of classic muscle with modern reliability. The built 700 R4 automatic with overdrive means this truck can actually cruise comfortably on modern highways. The suspension setup is seriously impressive. C-notched frame, tubular A-arms, drop springs, and disc brakes all around. That 12-bolt Posey rear end is exactly what you want in a classic truck. The green bean metallic paint looks fantastic, and they've gone all out with new bumpers, moldings, glass, and a fresh wood bed. Inside, it's got custom leatherwork by Smith Customs, modern gauges, and a hidden audio system. Those 20-inch Riddler wheels really set off the whole package. The only minor issue mentioned is the wiper motor needs installation. That's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. With just 41,537 miles showing, and considering the comprehensive nature of this restoration, this price point actually seems pretty reasonable for what you're getting. This isn't just a restored truck. It's a thoroughly modernized classic that you could actually drive and enjoy regularly. If you're in the market for a C10, this one deserves a serious look. 4. Let's talk about this 1983 Ford Bronco that's up for grabs at $7,500. Now, I've got to be honest with you about this one. It's a pretty straightforward example of a classic full-size Bronco. The heart of this beast is a 351 Windsor V8, which is one of Ford's more reliable power plants from this era, and the owner says it runs good. With 61,503 miles on the clock, it's got relatively low mileage for a 40-year-old vehicle. The seller mentions they've redone the interior with new carpet and seats, which is definitely a plus since these old Broncos often have pretty worn-out interiors. It's rocking the classic black paint and comes with four-wheel drive and an automatic transmission. Now here's where we need to be real. The seller is pretty upfront about this being an as-is sale, and the buyer needs to handle smog and registration. That's something to consider, especially in states with strict emissions laws. The seller seems pretty adamant about serious buyers only, which usually suggests they've had some time wasters. At $7,500, you're getting a fairly priced full-size Bronco with the desirable 351 Windsor engine. It's not a show queen, but it appears to be a solid driver with some recent interior work. Just remember to factor in potential smog work if your state requires it. These early 80s Broncos are gaining popularity, and finding one with reasonable miles that runs well isn't as easy as it used to be. Just make sure to give it a thorough inspection before pulling the trigger. 5. We're looking at something pretty interesting. A 1970 Chevy truck with a twist. And I've got to be straight with you about this one. At $28,500, we're looking at a unique build that combines a 1970 short bed with a 68 front end. Now let's talk about whether this price point makes sense. The truck's got the original 307 engine paired with a 350 transmission, and the seller says it runs well. They've added some nice upgrades like power steering and disc brakes, which definitely improve the driving experience. The 5-lug setup all around is a practical choice, and they've done a new patina paint job, which is pretty trendy right now in the classic truck world. But here's where I need to be completely honest with you folks. $28,500 is sitting at the higher end of the market for these trucks, especially with a 307 engine, which isn't typically the most sought-after power plant. Yes, it's got a new interior and current tags through 2025, but you're definitely paying a premium for the patina look and recent updates. If you're specifically looking for a cleaned-up, ready-to-drive classic truck with that popular patina aesthetic, this might be worth considering. But if you're shopping purely on value, you might want to negotiate or keep looking. It's a clean build with some nice features, but make sure you're comfortable with the price point for what's essentially a modified classic with the original, modest performance engine. 6. We're checking out a pretty interesting 1976 Chevrolet Dually that's listed for $14,900, and I've got to share my thoughts on this one. First off, there's something odd in the listing. It says FWD, which is definitely a mistake, since these trucks were rear-wheel drive, so take that as a typo in the listing. What we're looking at here is a classic Dually, powered by the legendary 454 Big Block V8. That's the motor you want in these old workhorses. With 125,000 miles on the clock, it's been used but not abused. The seller mentions it cruises comfortably at highway speeds, 70 to 80 miles per hour, which is pretty impressive for a 47-year-old truck. The truck comes with some nice features for its era: power steering, power brakes, and working AC, which is a big plus in a vintage vehicle. They've done a custom interior job, and the white paint gives it that classic work truck look. Now, let's talk value at $14,900. For a clean, running 454, powered 76 Dually with working AC and custom interior, the price isn't outrageous in today's market, especially if the customization is well done. These old Duallys are getting harder to find in good condition, and the 454 engine definitely adds value. Just remember, you're buying a 47-year-old truck, so despite its excellent condition, you should still expect some age-related maintenance needs. It would be worth checking the usual rust spots these are known for and getting a good look at that custom interior work. 7. We're looking at a pretty bare-bones listing for a 1965 Dodge D100 pickup, and at $2,900, we need to be really honest about what we're looking at here. The seller isn't giving us much to work with, but let's break down what we know. This old Dodge is powered by the 318 Poly V8, not to be confused with the later LA Series 318, paired with a 4-speed manual transmission. That's actually a pretty cool combination for these trucks. The seller simply states it runs and drives, which is about as basic as you can get for a description. The odometer shows 1,000 miles, which almost certainly means it's rolled over at least once. Now folks, at $2,900, we're definitely in project truck territory here. The super brief description and low price point suggest this isn't a restored beauty. It's likely a running project that needs work. The fact that the seller doesn't mention condition, paint, interior, or any details is pretty telling. But here's the thing. If you're looking for an entry-level classic truck project with a solid drivetrain combo, this could be worth checking out. These old Dodge D100S are getting harder to find, and that Poly 318 4-speed combo is pretty desirable. Just go into this expecting to do some work, probably lots of it. At this price point, consider it a blank canvas for a restoration project rather than a ready-to-show classic. Make sure to check for the usual rust issues these old trucks are known for, especially in the cab corners and bed. 8. We're checking out a pretty special 1971 Chevy Custom 20, and I've got to tell you, this one's got some interesting features that make it stand out. At $22,500, let's break down what makes this 3/4-ton 4x4 worth talking about. First off, this is claimed to be a one-owner truck, which is pretty remarkable for a 50-plus-year-old vehicle. What's really catching my eye here is the bucket seats and center console setup. That's a rare option for these trucks, and definitely adds to its appeal. The truck's sporting its original yellow paint, which gives it that authentic vintage charm, and they've freshened up the interior with recovered seats and new carpet. Under the hood, we're looking at a replacement crate motor showing 38,413 miles, and it's got some nice creature comforts like AC, power steering, and power brakes. The dual battery setup is a practical upgrade, especially for a 4x4 of this era. Now let's talk value at $22,500. While it might seem steep to some, these custom 24x4s from this era, especially with the bucket seat configuration, are becoming increasingly desirable. The seller mentions they were planning to restore it, but have too many projects, which suggests there might be some room for negotiation and some areas that could use attention. For someone looking for a distinctive classic Chevy truck that's not just another standard cab work truck, this could be worth checking out. The combination of the 4x4 setup, bucket seats, and one-owner history makes it pretty unique. Just make sure to give it a thorough inspection, particularly around the usual rust spots these are known for, even though it appears to be a well-maintained example. 9. We're looking at a really interesting 1955 Chevy 3100 that's been built into a cool rat rod-style truck. And I've got to be straight with you about what we're looking at here. Listed at $19,000, this is a truck with two personalities. Let's start with the good stuff. Under the hood, there's a fresh 355 small block built by Chuck's Racing Engines. That's a serious power plant. They've done some smart upgrades like power assist front disc brakes, new shocks, and an aluminum radiator. The interior's gotten some love too, with new insulation, carpet, headliner, and a refurbished bench seat. Those new rally wheels wrapped in BF Goodrich TA radials definitely add to the look. Now, here's where we need to keep it real. The seller lists the condition as fair and mentions it needs paint and bodywork. The odometer's broken, showing 25,000 miles, so we don't know the true mileage. This is very much a driver-quality build with a rat rod vibe, not a show truck. At $19,000, you're paying for the mechanical upgrades more than the cosmetics. That fresh 355 engine, disc brake conversion, and interior work represent significant investment. If you're looking for a classic truck that's mechanically sorted and fun to drive while embracing the rat rod aesthetic, this could be your ticket. However, if you're wanting a pristine 55 3100, you'd need to factor in additional costs for paint and bodywork. The seller's honest about it being either a driver as is or a candidate for further restoration. For the right buyer who appreciates a truck with some patina and modern mechanical upgrades, this could be a pretty cool ride that's ready to enjoy while you gradually take it to the next level. 10. We're checking out a 1960 Ford F100 that's listed for $12,500. And there are some really interesting details we need to talk about here. This is one of those trucks that's got some great features, but also needs a bit of honesty in the discussion. The seller claims it's in excellent condition with the original short box never being painted and no dents. That's pretty remarkable for a 63-year-old truck. What's really interesting is the Y-Block V8 that's apparently only got 50 miles on it, suggesting a recent rebuild or replacement. They've done some nice mechanical updates, including a new radiator, battery, master cylinder, gas gauge, and a fresh exhaust system with headers. Now, here's where we need to keep it real. Despite the excellent condition rating, there are some issues to address. The windshield and side windows are cracked, which is a significant detail that'll need attention. That's not just a cosmetic issue. It's a safety concern that'll need to be addressed. At $12,500, you're looking at a truck that seems to be mechanically fresh but needs some glasswork. The perfect seat condition and new door rubber are nice touches, and having an original undented short box is definitely a plus in the classic truck world. The Y-Block V8 with manual transmission is a desirable combo for enthusiasts. For someone looking for a classic F100 with good bones and some recent mechanical work, this could be worth checking out. Just factor in the cost of new glass when considering the asking price. These early 60s F100s are getting harder to find, especially with original boxes, so despite the window issues, this one might be worth a look if you're in the market for a classic Ford pickup. 11. We're looking at a 1985 Dodge Ram Charger, and I've got to keep it real with you about this one. Listed at $5,900, this is definitely what we'd call a running project, and the seller's pretty upfront about that. Let's start with the good stuff. It's got the robust 5.9 LV8, that's the 360 for you Mopar folks, which is running well according to the seller. It's got headers that give it that mean sound, and it comes with nice rims and tires. Being a 4x4 with all power options is definitely a plus, and that 77,000 mile odometer reading isn't bad for a vehicle this age. Now let's be honest about the condition. The seller rates it as fair, and there's a reason for that. The interior is partially disassembled with parts, door panels, cluster bezel, stored inside the vehicle. It's been sitting in storage without plates, and while it's an Arizona truck, which usually means less rust, it's clearly a project that the current owner never got around to completing. At $5,900, you're buying a running project that needs interior reassembly and probably some other TLC. The seller's even open to trading it for a fuel-efficient car for their granddaughter, which suggests they're motivated to move it. 12. We're checking out a 1978 Chevy El Camino that's caught my attention, and let me tell you why this one's interesting. Listed at $7,800, we're looking at what appears to be a pretty well-preserved example of these classic car trucks. What's really catching my eye here is that this El Camino still wears its original black paint, which is pretty remarkable for a 45-year-old vehicle. The seller claims it's rust-free and has all its trim and chrome pieces intact. That's becoming increasingly rare for these vehicles. With 93,000 original miles, it hasn't been run into the ground, and it's loaded with all the comfort features you'd want. Tilt steering, cruise control, AC, power steering, and power disc brakes. The fact that it's just gotten new tires is a nice bonus. That's one less immediate expense for the next owner. These late 70s El Caminos are really starting to gain appreciation in the classic car market. Especially original, well-maintained examples like this appears to be. At $7,800, the price is actually pretty fair for a clean, original paint El Camino with all its trim intact and a full set of working features. While it's not the more desirable SS model, it's a solid example of a regular El Camino that appears to have been well cared for. Just remember, even in excellent condition, any car from 1978 will need regular maintenance and might have some age-related quirks with things like the AC system or power accessories. 13. We're looking at a pretty interesting 1979 GMC C30 dually, and there's quite a bit to unpack here at the $9,500 price point. This isn't just any old GMC, it's a Sierra Classic with the Camper Special package, which makes it a bit more special than your average work truck. Let's talk about what makes this truck interesting. It's got its numbers matching 454 big block with a freshly serviced 400 transmission. The seller's invested about $7K in engine repairs and upgrades recently, which is significant. What's really cool is all the original features that still work. Power windows, locks, AC, tilt steering, and even dual fuel tanks, which often give up on these old trucks. The factory tack and 4.10 gears make this a proper hauler, and those bucket seats with center console are a nice touch for a 70s truck. Now, being honest here, the seller's up front that it's not perfect and could use restoration, but it's apparently solid enough for daily use. Being a former Kansas truck might help explain why it's survived well enough to be usable. With 30,000 miles showing, though on a vehicle this age we should assume it's rolled over, it's got some life left in it. At $9,500 firm, you're paying for that big recent mechanical investment and a pretty well-optioned Classic dually. The Sierra Classic trim level and Camper Special package add value, and finding one with working power accessories isn't common. The headers and dual exhaust probably make that 454 sound pretty good too. 14. We're looking at a 1971 Ford F100 Ranger that's listed for $2,700. And I've got to be completely honest with you about what we're looking at here. This is definitely a project truck, and the seller's pretty upfront about that. Let's start with the good stuff. It's got the 360 V8 with a 2-barrel carb that's apparently running well, and they've done some decent recent work including a rebuilt carburetor, new fuel pump, new behind-the-seat gas tank with sending unit, fresh plugs, distributor components, battery, and 4 new tires. That's actually a decent amount of recent maintenance for a $2,700 truck. Now let's be real about the challenges, and there are several. The transmission is slipping in second gear, and the seller recommends trailering at home. There's rust in the front fenders and other places, always concerning when you hear that. The interior is rough, and it needs a windshield. At $2,700 firm, you're buying a non-driving project that's going to need some significant work. The transmission issue alone could be a costly repair, and rust repair isn't cheap either. However, if you're handy with a wrench and looking for a classic F100 project with the desirable Ranger trim and a running V8, this could be a starting point. These early 70s F100S are getting harder to find, especially Ranger models. But go into this knowing you're buying a project that needs immediate attention to get back on the road. 15. We're looking at a 1985 GMC Sierra that's listed for $7,500. And let me tell you what we're really dealing with here. The seller's listing seems a bit confused, mentioning both Sierra and Blazer. But let's focus on what we know for sure. The heart of this truck is a newer GM crate engine with an estimated 50,000 miles on it, which is definitely a plus compared to the truck's total 193,000 miles. They've done some significant upgrades, including a 4-inch lift kit with new shocks and brake lines, and they've refreshed the interior with new carpet and seats. Now let's be real here. The seller's message, "To any projects, something has to go," suggests this might be one of multiple project vehicles they're trying to move. They mention that all trim parts and interior parts are included, which often means some of these aren't actually installed on the truck right now. It currently needs a battery, which is a minor issue, but indicates it might have been sitting for a while. At $7,500, you're looking at what appears to be a partially completed project. The good news is you're getting a truck with a newer crate engine and fresh suspension work. The included parts could be valuable if you're planning to complete the build. For someone looking for a classic GMC 4X4 with some modern upgrades, this could be worth checking out. Just make sure to get a clear inventory of what parts are actually installed versus what comes with it, and verify the condition of that crate engine. 16. We're looking at a 1980 Chevy El Camino, and I've got to be pretty direct about this listing because there's not much information to work with here. Listed at $7,500, let's break down what we know and what we don't. The seller tells us it's got 64,000 miles, though the listing header shows 65,482. Small discrepancy there. A rebuilt V6 engine, good tires, and a clean title. It's wearing what appears to be orange paint. And that's about all we get from this super brief description. Now, I've got to be honest here. $7,500 for a V6 El Camino from 1980 is sitting at the higher end of the market, especially without any details about the condition of the body, interior, or when that engine rebuild was done. The V6 models, while more economical, aren't as desirable as their V8 counterparts, which typically affects their value. The low mileage is a plus if it's genuine, but we'd really need to know more about the overall condition to justify that price point. These El Caminos are known for rust issues, particularly in the bed and rear quarters, and the listing doesn't address any of that. If you're interested in this one, you'll definitely want to see it in person and ask some important questions. When was the engine rebuilt? How's the interior condition? Any rust issues? Has it been regularly maintained? Without more details, it's hard to say if this is a fair deal at $7,500. 17. We're checking out a 1971 El Camino SS clone that's listed at $25,700, and there's quite a bit to unpack here. Let's be totally honest about what we're looking at. First off, it's important to note this is a clone, not an original SS, and the seller's upfront about that, which is refreshing. The car's been professionally painted, and according to the seller, it's show-quality work. Under the hood, it's running a 350 V8 paired with a 350 transmission, and they've added some nice performance touches like a B&M racing shifter. The modifications are pretty appealing. You've got Weld racing wheels, which aren't cheap, a sprayed-in bed liner, super practical for actually using the bed, and racing stripes on the hood. The seller's really enthusiastic about the paint quality, mentioning multiple times how good it looks. Now let's talk value at $25,700. While the seller mentions that the closest car to it is $60K, we need to keep it real. This is a clone, not an original SS, which significantly affects value. However, if the paintwork is as good as described, and considering the cost of professional paint jobs these days, plus those weld wheels and other upgrades, the price isn't completely out of line for a well-done Restomod. This appears to be built as a show-quality driver that you can actually use and enjoy, rather than a numbers-matching collector piece. For someone looking for a sharp-looking El Camino with modern touches who doesn't need original SS credentials, this could be worth checking out. 18. We're looking at something pretty unique, a 1979 Chevy Elove 4X4, and these little trucks are getting seriously hard to find, especially in 4X4 configuration. Listed at $9,000. Let's break down what we're looking at here. First off, I've got to point out that the seller's description is incredibly brief, which leaves a lot of questions unanswered. They mention it's in good condition, and just passed a smog check, which is definitely positive for a California truck. It's showing 30,682 miles, but the seller admits they're not sure how the odometer works on these old LUVs, so take that number with a grain of salt. These little trucks came with a 4-cylinder engine and manual transmission, which was actually a pretty reliable combination. The 4X4 version is particularly desirable because they were relatively rare. Not many LUVs came with 4-wheel drive. Now let's talk about that $9,000 asking price. While it might seem steep for an old compact pickup, these LUVs have developed quite a following, and clean 4X4 examples are getting really hard to find. The fact that it's smog compliant is a big plus in California. However, with such a brief description, you'd definitely want to inspect this one carefully in person. Check for the usual rust spots these were known for, especially in the bed and cab corners. Make sure all the 4X4 components work properly, as parts can be tricky to find for these. 19. We're looking at a 1975 Ford F250 listed at $12,000, and I've got to be really honest about what we're dealing with here. This is definitely a project truck, despite the good condition rating. Let's start with the positives. It's got the desirable 390 V8 engine, which is a strong power plant when running right. The seller mentions it has original paint with minimal rust, which is pretty rare for a 48-year-old truck. The interior door panels are in good shape, which is actually noteworthy because these often get trashed over time. Now let's get real about the situation. This is a non-running project. The classic ran when parked line appears here, and the seller mentions it needs carburetor work and fuel system cleaning. In project truck language, that could mean anything from a simple carb rebuild to a complete fuel system overhaul. We've all heard ran when parked before, and it often means hasn't run in quite a while. At $12,000, I've got to say this price seems pretty optimistic for a non-running project truck, even with the desirable 390 engine. Yes, these old Fords are gaining value as classics, but this one's going to need some investment to get back on the road. The seller's marketing it as a great collectible classic. But remember, you're buying a project that needs work just to run. 20. We're diving into something really wild. A 1962 GMC C10 that's been built into a serious performance machine, listed at $25,000. And folks, this isn't your grandfather's work truck anymore. Let's break down this beast. Under the hood, we're looking at a built 383 stroker with a serious cam, 575 plus lift, roller rockers, and gear drive. They've gone all out with a Holley Super Sniper 2x4 setup on a tunnel ram, plus a complete Aeromotive fuel system with an A1000 pump. But wait, it gets better. There's a fully TIG-welded stainless turbo kit featuring a Borg-Warner T6/S 475 turbo with a 60 mm wastegate and 4-inch fender dump. The suspension's been thoroughly modernized with a 66K member swap for coil springs, 3-inch drop springs, and 2.5-inch drop spindles with disc brake conversion. The wheel setup is pretty wild too. 17-inch Vision drags up front and custom built, recentered 15x12 welds out back, wrapped in fresh Mickey Thompson ET Street Rs. Now, here's where we need to keep it real. This is currently a non-running project. It needs a transmission, and the charge piping isn't finished. The odometer's broken, showing 79,000 miles, so actual mileage is unknown. This is a serious performance build that's going to need some final assembly to get back on the road. At $25,000, you're paying for all those high-end performance parts and custom fabrication work. The seller's OBO, or best offer, suggests some flexibility on price. For someone looking for a serious performance C10 project that's already got most of the expensive parts, this could be interesting. Just remember, you'll need to factor in the cost of a transmission and finishing the turbo setup.